You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Kevin, if we have a good show today, we won't be relegated to yelling out our window.
We won't? Good.
No.
Good. So we won't go from podcast to like AM radio.
No. Ooh, a terrestrial radio smack there. That's good stuff.
I know. Come on. It's all good fun. But there was some, if you watched the Bournemouth Minnesota game last night, you saw that airplane, that propeller airplane with the message after following.
Yeah, pro run or something. Yeah, I can only imagine. I always have this vision when they do this, and this is about the second time. I think it's different MLS Cup as well, and we all know who did it. When we say we, it was I think it was his second in command there, Brad Faced or whatever. I don't know. We
There's a second in command now. Oh boy.
Yeah, I know. There's this is his main disciple. At any rate, they rented the banner out, the pro rel now. I always think of I imagine this hardworking mother, single mother of two, brings her kids love soccer. She gets them in the car. The kids are all excited. They're going to the stadium, and then all of a sudden they see this banner floating around, and then one kid looks up and goes, "Mommy, we can't go. There's no pro rel."
You know what I'm imagining? You remember the movie Independence Day, the first one? Like the original one.
Yeah.
Remember Randy Quaid or Dennis Quaid, whatever the guy's name, played like the pilot of a small airplane, where I imagine him on the side of a runway taking the banner, tying it up to the airplane, saying, what does that even mean? What am I doing this?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the other thing too. You get no peril. What's peril? Does anyone know what peril is?
And from up there, it looks like pro. It looks like one word. And so it's like, what's that? Is that a new kind of Purell?
Yeah, look, again, promotion and relegation is a remarkable romantic system that is used all over the world, and we all understand that we enjoy it in other parts of the world. The reason it's used there is because it's historically been set up that way, both financially and institutionally. So it works there. These clubs, they're not franchises, so they haven't paid franchise fees to go into the top flight, which would, if you tried to relegate a team from the top flight, they paid $100 million to get there. Guessing there'd be litigation. Anyway, just putting that aside. But what I will say, as I always say to my friends in the NASL, which are often who the pro rel proponents are, is when NASL wants to open itself up to relegation, when its teams want to expose themselves to the potential of dropping down to a lower level, that's when you can start to really criticize MLS for not doing the same. But in the meantime, you got to really objectively look at this. You have teams in NASL right now that can barely afford to pay their players. They can't pay their players in some cases. It's really going to help them if they get relegated. Is it really going to help the American soccer pyramid if the Tampa or the Fort Lauderdale Strikers disappear? Because that's what would happen if they got relegated, and somebody will go, "Oh, name me the example of a team in England or whatever that's been relegated and is folded." First off, if I did some research, I suspect I could find some financial problems that existed from teams that did get relegated. But that aside, that system's set up to deal with that. They have parachute payments and everything else. Where the hell is this money going to come to protect teams that drop down? This topic is so frustrating because people that are proponents of a system that, again, is romantic and ideally we'd love it, fail to look in any real world solutions with it. It makes me insane. I meant to make this a joke, Kevin, but I just wanted to put
You got started. Don't beg on you. That's not hard, Duane. It's not good for you. No, I'm just kidding aside. There's some renovation close to Duane's building. But, when we're talking about the pro relegation factor, the idea of, look, a team like Leicester can go from the bottom to up and win the league. Yeah, but again, it's not the way the infrastructure was built here, and in the growth of the game the last 2 decades, it was never talked about. And what Duane mentioned, nothing stops the NASL from doing it now. Well, that's what I would say. That's what I would put on the banner. Do it now. You can. You're set up to do it. Not every other league is.
I believe it was Jonathan Tannenwall on NASL Nightcap, if you want to go back in the archives, was having a conversation with Bill Peterson. He said, you want Pro Rel? We'll do it. Because they can. They have it within their power to do it. They have cooperation with the fourth tier. They could easily drop those teams down there if they wanted to. They could easily promote teams from that tier. But they would understand that the same issues that exist that prevent it from really realistically happening at an MLS level to NASL level exist that level too. These teams, when they get promoted, quote unquote, well, half of them wouldn't be able to accept the promotion because they can't afford to build the stadium upgrades to where they need to be a top flight stadium. And
just an example, Duane, the Strikers were not even able to fulfill all their financial obligation with their staff and their players. How do you want them to comply to MLS rules now?
Yeah, what's their DP going to be signed for?
So Ronaldo's going to come back? The old Brazilian one we're talking about?
Yeah, really drive them into the ground. Anyway, it's a silly conversation. We're talking about romance versus pragmatism is what it comes down to. And you know what? I am a romantic person too when it comes to this game, but I'm also pragmatic because I live in it. I run in it. I walk in it every day. I go in Canada. I mean, I've heard people say when the Canadian Premier League starts, there should be pro rel. And I'm like, what? You're gonna up? Who's getting promoted from where?
We're already having trouble getting a small amount of team together to form that league. Why would we want a team to go back down? Come on, let's face it.
The North Toronto Nitros are going to go up, but they play their home games at Varsity Stadium in Toronto, with a track around it and football lines on it permanently. Seats like 3,000. That's what you want, guys? Come on.
Exactly. And you know what else kind of silly happened in the game last night, Duane, versus Minnesota United versus AFC Bournemouth? Probably one of the worst, if not the worst, own goal I have ever seen in my life.
Sammy
the loose goalkeeper, backup goalkeeper, did a blunder of all blunder. Takes the ball on his right side of the box, takes the ball, looking at his defense. He's about to throw it to somebody, but he didn't check his angle correctly, and he literally threw the ball into the net.
Yeah, look, I, as a crappy beer league keeper, have done stupid things in the past. I don't think I've ever thrown the ball in the own net, though. I've let it go through my arms. I've been looking the other way. I was tying my shoe once when the ball was shot, and I didn't notice it, and it went straight in. That's when they still razz me about. But at any rate.
I did the famous, I went up too far, and the guy just slobbed it out, and he was like, oh, they can do that.
That happened in one of the kickabouts, the preseason kickabouts this year, with my former co-host Ben Rycroft decided to chip me from center because I was playing around at the end of the kickabout. Thanks, Ben, for that, by the way. So they heard that for a while too. So yeah, we've all beer league keepers have all done something stupid in the past, but few of us have ever thrown the ball in our own net. And if you putting aside the possible terrible reason why that happened, and match fixing would be why I do that. And unfortunately, we have to think that way sometimes, especially at a friendly. However, putting that aside, I do think probably it was a case of maybe he had like stick him on his hip, gloves or something.
It's the way it happens too, because he runs after the ball, dives into the net, ends up tangled in the actual net himself. Oh, the memes that will be made with that picture.
I think, I think what did happen is he grabbed the ball and he turned to throw it and thought that there was a player where he was going to throw it and realized he wasn't there. So he tried to stop it and got caught between and threw it straight into the turf. And then, oh my God, it's going in. And you can just see him like run back and he dives out.
No.
Yeah, we've all been there. At any rate, that's pretty sad. At least it was a friendly, not a league game for him, but still.
But it was like in Minnesota term, they're playing a championship team. Because they just got relegated.
No, they're still up.
They're still up. Okay, so they're playing a Premier League team. and they had a lot of eyes on the product, and you had to take that timing to do that goal. Now it's going to be in every news of sports across the globe since yesterday. At least you're getting some exposure, but it's what, like Donald Trump would say, good press or bad press. It's just press.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think obviously some people will take that as here's evidence that North American soccer is crap or that the NASL is crap. And it's not. It's an outlier play. But it's kind of funny, and it will get played for years and years, just like the Kai Kamara. Have you ever seen the Kai Kamara when he missed the, well, he went to tap the ball in and fell at the last second and hit his hand before it crossed the line? It was like a wide, like, you can't even get more of a wide open net. The ball was sitting on the line with no keeper in front of it. All he had to do is touch it. But no, he fell and knocked it in. It's one. If you haven't seen that one, look up Kai Kamara miss, and it's hilarious. And there's like video out there where they put like the Benny Hill theme music on it, and it just loops. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, so there's lots of good stuff out there that even some of the best players in the world have done stupid things. So
one of the last play of Greg Sutton's career was with Montreal back in 2012 when they were in Colorado. He was subbed in the game, and it was kind of a blunder, not similar, but the ball bounced like 3 times in the air, and he couldn't find it, and it just ended up in the net. So, a lot of funny things happen sometimes in North American soccer, and like last night, we will see it again for a long time.
I forgot that Mr. Sutton went back to finish after he was in Toronto, went back to Montreal.
Everybody tried to forget about that. I think he would say the same thing too.
Yeah. He was, of course, TFC's first keeper in 2007. All right, let's move on to some actual stuff on the pitch in Major League Soccer. It was trade day yesterday.
Of course, right after we're done the show, Duane. Of course, not before, but during and after. Like, hey, why not? Let's just do all the trades after they're done.
And one of them was, and we've talked about this on the show before, this what I think was one of those quote unquote rental moves. Vancouver, because they need a striker for the second half of the season. Now that they've let one goal, Espinola, they brought him in from DC for some GAM. They sent GAM to DC. DC then flipped that GAM for Mullins, NYCFC. But let's focus on Vancouver for a while. Well, everything we know about his contract is that we don't know anything about his contract. Apparently. Yep. It's $200,000 in the MLS PU records, but anyone who knows anything about this are saying, no, don't believe that. He's over the max. This is a guy that is close to a DP, probably paid down by allocation, but certainly he will be replacing Rivero from Vancouver in terms of the salary hit for this year. But I do think, Kevin, as I said, and I'll let you jump in after this, I do think, as I said, that this is what we've called a rental, that they're bringing a guy in for the second half of the year because basically all signs point to him bolting the league at the end of the year.
Yep, and we're already late in the transfer window. If you look at it, we're already 2 weeks past the beginning of it. And salary perspective-wise, what the Vancouver Whitecaps will have to pay him compared to what it would be. It's not even half. It's a little less than what his salary would be. So it's, like you mentioned, kind of a rental, kind of a test, kind of a showcase for him. Like, look, we know you have bigger plans maybe, or different plans, and not necessarily bigger. It's getting later in his career. But whatever your plans are for next year, we're giving you a showcase here. Help us. We need you. Help us score goals. Help us climb that standings. And in return, you might get what you want as well. If it's a new contract with Vancouver for next year, maybe. If it's something else, well, it's something else. But I think it's a situation that could be beneficial for both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to help if this team is a playoff team, and they aspire to be clearly an R right now in terms of they're above the red line. You would think that he could then feature in that, play in what's perceived to be a tougher conference. I don't think you need to say perceived. What the Western Conference has demonstrated as such. So that might help him a little bit. In terms of Vancouver, although they do have 2 areas of weakness right now, and it's kind of surprising they're playing as well as they do points-wise when they have what seems to be a lot of problems going on. However, they've addressed one of them by they got rid of Rivero, so they brought in a guy to replace that. So they're at least treading water there, if not maybe improving a little bit because they have more of an established MLS player coming in than what Rivero was. They still, I think, need to do something on the back line. We'll see what happens there. They did bring in De Jong and Edgar earlier this year. They're probably hopeful that addressed that. And they really, we'll see is what I'm getting at, because Vancouver has a lot to prove in the second half of the season in terms of improving those 2 areas of weakness, both being the ability to score the crucial goal and the ability to stop anything this year. If they can turn that around, I think most people picked them early on. There were even some people that picked them to win MLS Cup and be contenders for the Spurs Shield. They haven't lived up to that. If these moves that they made can fit in well and fit in quickly, hey, MLS is a funny season. If you look back to Portland last year at this time, no one was talking about them as champions, right?
Exactly. And another trade yesterday. There was a trade in the signing. Two more in the signing. Tosin Ricketts, probably the worst kept secret in Major League Soccer, finally signed with Toronto, Duane.
Yeah, we talked a bit about this already. This is a wing player, an attacking player. He's not going to score a ton of goals, Toronto fans. I think most Toronto fans listening to this show might understand this, but you might want to tell your seatmates first to listen to the show. But after you tell them that, and then tell them again, and then tell them about our Patreon, after you do all that, then maybe tell them that he's more of a setup player, more of a guy that's going to create some space. He will do that. He should create more space. He's got that pace down the wing, something Toronto's been lacking this year other than Endo. And Endo is somewhat limited as a young player. To bring a more savvy veteran in that can bring pace in the wing should open things up a little bit for Javinko, especially if Josie's back, as he's suggested he will be this week. So that, in theory, on paper, looks like a good move. The concern people have with Ricketts is exactly what I said off the top. He's not going to score much. He's a 1-in-5 scorer. For an attacking player, that's not ideal. And in this market, if an attacking player isn't scoring all the time, a lot of people are going to boo him because that's just not this market. A lot of people just say attacker must score rather than see anything else that happens. And with Ricketts, he can be frustrating up top because he can miss some sitters. He's kind of a Chad Barrett type that way.
Another trade yesterday, Duane, the Montreal Impact traded a second-round draft pick to Toronto for an international spot. And the rumor going on in Montreal, Duane, is that Montreal will use that international spot to get Hernan Bernardello back. Remember back in 2013?
Wow. Blast from the past.
Exactly. Well, in 2013, Hernan Bernardello was a mainstay for the Montreal Impact. People didn't see him as a success in the mainstream media because he was not scoring goal, but defensively, in the midfield, he was what Montreal needed at the time, and it is what Montreal needs at this very time as well. A kind of a Donadell on steroids. Not that he's taking steroids, but his play is like a Donadell, but even more, a little harsh, but even more solid defensively. What he can do with the Montreal Impact could be very interesting. So if what has been reported by Arcadio Marcusi earlier last week, basically, and the talk of the town is now he is free of a contract. He's not owned by anybody, so his free transfer, and Montreal would just have to sign him on a different pay scale than it did back then, so he wouldn't be DP, but he might be coming back. He was loved in Montreal, in the club itself. He loved his time in the city. The only reason why he left was because of a crazy offer by Cruz Azul that he could not turn down. So that was the case. Now he might come back to Montreal, and maybe what they need is somebody that could solidify defensively and give them minute in the midfield.
Yeah. I always like it when players come back to their team. I don't know. It's just I'm a sentimentalist that way. It's only happened once with CFC history with D-Row, of course, coming back. Would this be the first Major League Soccer player for the Impact to come back?
Yes. Well, there was Patrice Bernier, but Patrice Bernier played in the 2000s.
And like in the MLS era, yeah.
But in the MLS era, it would be the first one to do so, yeah. When it would be because he left on good terms. He didn't leave on he didn't burn any bridges, and he didn't leave because he couldn't cut it. He left for bigger and better things, and maybe what the Impact needs. So there was that talk last week, and now with the fact that Montreal got that international spot, it looks like they're making space for him, but they still need to make one space where they'll have to probably release somebody. Who will that be? That's the other question. Somebody from local area, somebody from the academy that didn't necessarily produce at the higher level that still has a pro contract. We'll see what happens in the next few days for Montreal Impact.
Yeah, they could also trade. That's also an option too, because not every MLS trade, as we well know, needs to have a player coming back. You can trade for Gam or Tam or
just balls,
whatever. Well, that's essentially what a second round draft pick is what Montreal is. Although, let me take a step back from that. In the USL MLS 2 team era, a second round draft pick can help your USL team, but you're essentially trading for a USL level player, and you hope that player can develop from there. So we might get to a point where those second round picks, and I have to reevaluate that when I do my draft evaluation every January. We might get to the point where that might be a little bit more valuable. But right now, it's kind of a bag of balls for that. And look, I was joking on Twitter yesterday. Anyone who thinks there's some kind of burning hate between the front offices of TFC and the Impact kind of ignores the fact that there's a lot of these trades that happen between the two teams that are sort of scratching each other's back, right?
If I was a fly on the wall, and I could have been in the office when that happens, probably Adam picks the phone. Hey, Tim, I need an international spot. Do you have one available, and what would it cost? Yeah, second round. I'll fake it. Okay. So next time you need something, I'll be here. All right. Thanks, Tim. Bye, Adam. That's the gist of the call, in my opinion. What did you think? Yeah, exactly. All right, so we'll take a quick break and be right back right here on Soccer Today.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. Hey, it's Kevin of the Sports Podcasting Network. On SPN, on top of What's the Score, the Sports News Quiz, you can find a plethora of great sports podcasts. Hardwood Radio, Gridiron Radio, Sports, it's in the game. Scuderia F1, the second most listened to F1 podcast in the whole world. Soccer Today, live radio shows like Open Lines After Dark, MLS Postgame Show, Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast, Off the Woodworks, and much, much more. All that on the Sports Podcasting Network.com. And we're back on Soccer Today. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we are back on the air. Duane, a lot of news in the world of the Mercato in the next few days too. Paul Pogba will or won't he go to Manchester United? That's the question.
I probably will. I think at this point, the type of offer that we're talking about, the United's making to Juve is pretty hard for a club, any club in the world outside of maybe Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester United, Manchester City probably as well. They're about the only clubs in the world that could look at a number like that and just say no. So it's a bit absurd, the money that's going around, but it has a lot to do with the money that's coming in. Manchester United still makes a lot of money each year, so they can spend money like this and still not necessarily put themselves at risk of financial fair play in any real way.
No, exactly. But that's the one question, though, because of financial fair play over the last few years, it's taking longer. It's more complicated to get those deals done. It just shows you how maybe back in the day, big transfers like Ronaldo and, well, we said a ramification of the Neymar ones were more necessarily, not necessarily backdoor dealings, but they were not necessarily on the up and up as today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, depends on what you mean by up and up. There's a lot of money floating around, and obviously tapping up and things like that existed back then. They probably still do today. Third-party ownership, they're scratching out. I think that was more of a problem in the past. So, there's been some good coming to this. I have some issues with financial fair play that I've talked about before. I don't think it's equally applied across the board. I don't think it's necessarily fair for people or for clubs that aren't legacy clubs that haven't been, basically if City and PSG won, the train was pulling out of the station and City and PSG ran, sprinted, and caught the tail end and were dragged behind the train for a while and are slowly pulling themselves onto that legacy train as it pulls out of the stadium when it comes to financial fair play. But to me, any club that was left behind at the station can't catch up with the rules as they're trying to make them. Yeah. So I don't really like that. I think that it's unfortunate. I think that there's a better way that you can do it that has to do with debt load. It has to do with just not having teams run themselves into the ground, but not necessarily preventing them from having spending, which will allow them to then catch up to close gaps that are there right now. So have a 3, and there's been some changes in fairness. They now have a bit of a running total rather than any single year that they can be over, right?
Yeah. So yeah, cool. So at least there's ways to correct the situation and not just get stuck with the result after 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rotation over 3 years, so you have to be above ground. That's City ended up getting nailed as well with PSG with basically a slap in the wrist in terms of, although that said, City lost 2 roster spots for the Champions League. They went to semifinals this past year, but the year before when they had that roster restriction, they were hampered a little bit by that, without a doubt. So certainly there was some consequence to it, maybe not as much as others would like, but alas. All right, let's move completely from one side to the other and talk about the US. Yeah, the U.S. Open Cup. Not quite the same financials we're talking about there.
To be fair, there has been some forfeit in this tournament. There has been some financial compensation for some teams that traveled. So in a way, we have a segue in financial talk with this tournament.
All right, we have the semifinals have been set now, and we will have a relatively new champion. It won't be a new champion. All 4 teams left in this tournament have won the trophy at some point in time, but at the very earliest, that team, it'll be the first time the team that wins it will have won it for the first time in 9 years, 9 seasons, 10 seasons probably, and 9 calendar years. The last team of the 4 remaining to win it was New England in 2007, the Chicago Fire in 2006, FC Dallas in 1997, their only major trophy, and the Galaxy won it in 2005 last. I think the Galaxy are the most interesting one of those still left in. But before we get into those kind of conversations, let's just quickly go through the results from last night.
The Reds, Duane, penalties. We have seen penalties in Soldier Field in Boston, Massachusetts.
Soldier Field's in Chicago.
But I know, but that's what the Cup.us mentioned. But no, it was the home team was. It was
I see.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, the Revs and Philly 1-1 in regulation, and Philly was pretty devastated by this loss. You could tell it. They were saying, they really put a lot of stock in this. So for the Revs to go out and beat them was something that they really weren't very happy with. Alas, though, you got to win it on the field, and it seems like, to me, maybe the MLS teams as a whole have been trying a little bit harder in this competition this year than they have in the past few years, and that's good for the overall competition, and obviously, right?
No, exactly. And we had a Texas derby yesterday. FC Dallas versus Houston Dynamo. Dallas 1-0 at BBVA Compass. So a win on the road for Dallas in the U.S. Open Cup, making a way to the semifinals. For Dallas, it's a type of tournament where they can graduate their academy players in some sort, where they can face MLS opposition before they move on to the actual first team. So it's interesting to see how Dallas fares off. And now semifinals, it's quite one of my favorites for the tournament will be Dallas now. See if they play well against the Galaxy in the semifinal, which for once, Duane, we have the semifinals and the final on ESPN too.
Yeah, no, that's good for the tournament as well to increase that exposure. A lot of people get frustrated by the lack of attention that the USOC gets because they feel that, it should be self-intuitive to soccer fans. It's a playoff in many ways. As much as parallel competitions kind of confuse non-soccer fans out there. I think they're intuitive to soccer fans, obviously, and this particular format where it's all American teams and they're competing in a single elimination. It's sort of as I said, I think it should be obvious and understandable to Americans and to casual soccer fans out there. So I think it's good that the tournament has more exposure. I always wonder whether it might make sense, and I've said this before. And I understand there's a lot more teams coming in this, but once you get down to a quarterfinal stage or even a round of 16 stage, to have a condensed sprint to the championship in the U.S. Open Cup. So you have it over, like, maybe you take 10 days out of the MLS schedule to give a midseason break if you're not involved, and just have like a quarterfinals, semifinals, finals in a week stage. So you do like a Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday situation and have it maybe even in one place. And I think maybe that might be a way to get more attention for this tournament. I kind of like that idea. It's sort of an NCAA tournament sort of approach. I sort of think that would be a better way to do it, but better way in terms of how North Americans absorb sport. Because
those tournaments sort of drag, especially with the international breaks and the Euro this year. Like there's a drag to that tournament. It takes a long time. Or maybe just having more regularly every week, if it's possible with the schedule. League games on the weekend, cup games on Wednesdays, or vice versa, whenever the case is possible. But to get it done a little quicker, maybe.
Yeah, well, and it really starts to lose momentum here, too, this tournament. The final is just ages away still, and we have to go through a semifinal stage. It seems to me that they could do more to make the U.S. Open Cup seem like a tournament rather than something that's dragged out, because I think that's where it loses the momentum and the attention of the general soccer audience and the general sports audience, for sure. The Canadian Championship, although, it has its faults in terms of the amount of teams to come in and it's not being truly open, maybe soon that'll change the second part at any rate. But the one thing it does do well is it's very quick. Bang, 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 and it's done. And I think that helps that tournament a lot, Kevin.
It really does, because it gets some momentum. Look at the U.S. Open Cup. The unconfirmed date for the final is September 21st, and the semifinals will be August 9th and 10th. It is a long ways to go. You have a month and a half between the semifinals and the final due to when they can league. So it really does lose the momentum late in that tournament, which was kind of a case with the M1 Canadian Championship last year before the schedule was revisited.
Yeah, well, and that was because of the
change of schedule
last year. Yeah, so that made that long break, and it wasn't ideal. But this year, as you saw, and I heard actually on some of the American commentary that was talking a bit about the Canadian Championship, how they like that, how it was only the 2 weeks, but it was a month. It was basically a month sprint, and it's a lot for that month for those teams. But it's early enough in the season that they can recover and they can still put a pretty good amount of attention on it. And I think, on the whole, as much as we complain up here about some of the lineup choices that the Canadian teams, MLS teams make in this tournament, I think on the whole, they generally take the tournament a little more seriously than some American teams take the U.S. Open Cup. And I think that benefits the Voyageurs Cup in a great deal. Yeah, exactly. No, it's very interesting. All right. As we said, the score is 1-0 for Dallas over Houston, 4-2 for the Galaxy over Seattle, 3-0 for the Fire over Fort Lauderdale. The last non-MLS team is out. We've talked a lot about Fort Lauderdale's problems, so I don't feel like beating the dead horse anymore right now. Exactly, and no shock, no surprises for the Strikers at that level, at least in the quarterfinals. And the Rochester Rhinos remain the last team to be from outside MLS to have won this Open Cup in 1999, starting to become more and more ancient history, Kevin.
And I don't see necessarily the day where a non-MLS team will win that tournament again. It's not. I don't see it. I don't think it's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
There's a pretty big gap there. The Cosmos would be the team you'd think might be able to do it, but they so far haven't even really made a deep run in the tournament. So they've beaten an MLS team in both years that they've really seriously been involved, but still, it does show the gap when even the big bad Cosmos that really have a lot of focus pushed on this and want to establish themselves can't win it. Kevin, maybe just take a real quick break right here so we can refocus and reset. Come back. I want to talk a little bit more about Seattle and whether this is the worst Sounders team ever. There's a little NWSL news out of Montreal and some news out of Turkey. I want to talk about the situation in Turkey and how that's maybe going to affect some of the bigger teams there.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Start with Seattle, Kevin.
What's going on in Seattle? Not a lot, apparently.
Yeah, was Martins that good? I mean, that's kind of what I come back with this every time. Is
I don't think he was, actually. I think it's just coincidence, maybe, that his effect on this team, the way that he left, and they haven't been the same. I think it's a coincidence. I don't think he was the catalyst for that. But I think it's more Dempsey. What happened to Clint?
Well, he's getting old, right? And he's not been able to dominate. He seems to not be able to keep his head on his shoulders for long stretches without turning into a big screaming fool out there. And that's got to affect teams a little bit as well. I don't know. I think everyone sort of thinks that Seattle's going to turn it around deep down. And I'm not sure whether we're not at the point right now where it's silly to think that, where we're having kind of confirmation bias in terms of past history. Sure, a result will happen. And we'll go, yeah, there we go. That's why Seattle's okay. Like the 5-0 win there. But then they turn around, and even in a tournament like this, and this is why I think last night's result kind of caught me the most off guard. I would have thought Seattle, based on their history in this tournament, and LA kind of not taken seriously for the last decade, I would have thought for sure Seattle would have pulled that one out, but yet they had their ass handed to them again, and this is not the first time this year. It's just kind of an interesting sight, and it does make me wonder whether they can turn it around. Right now, Seattle's sitting on just 6 wins, 2 draws, and 11 losses, most in the league. That's the Sounders. They have never been bad since they came into this league. Well,
they were stuck indeed. We have to be at least close to the playoffs, if not in the playoffs every year. Like our first year, because of the fan support and that pressure that comes with it, they were always a contender. Now, talking about a team that is actually closer to the bottom than it's to the top, which is very rare in the case of Seattle. Questions are arising on Sigi Schmidt's future. Is he the man for the job? Is he the man to right the ship? Is the fact that the got Gareth flag away and all that, and we're not seeing results on the pitch this year, are all those moves put back into question? That's a feeling right now in Seattle. People are wanting for accountability with this team, and I think Sigi Schmidt might be it might take the rest of the season, and it might be an off-season move, but I think Sigi Schmidt might be the casualty in Seattle for the result this year.
Yeah, I'm going to give you some numbers here real quick. And these are I'm on Who Scored right now, whoscored.com, which, of course, is the best sort of advanced stats model out there that's easily accessible to the general public. It's a great website if you don't know it. But Who Scored is where I get a lot of my advanced numbers. But these aren't really advanced numbers I'm going to give you. I'm just going to give you now. These are the top 6 performers on Seattle based on the Who Scored ranking. And these are the numbers. And I'm going to have you guess what these numbers are, Kevin. Okay, you ready? 30, okay. 31, 31, 32, 33, 36. What do you think those numbers are, the top 6 performers for the Seattle Sounders on Who Scored?
That's a good question. Shots off target?
No, that would be the ages of the top 6 players.
It's so high, I didn't even think it was ages.
Yeah. So when you have talking about again, I mean, it drops down after that. You have Jordan Morris is the 7th performer based on these rankings at 21 years of age. So there's obviously a large drop off there, and you have quite a few, there before you get down to Tyrone Mears at 33, which at 11th sort of makes it back again. But yeah, you're looking at some key players: Clint Dempsey 33, Zach Scott 36. Brad Evans, 31. Chad Marshall, 31. Chad Marshall seems older than 31. Anyway.
Yeah, well, age is just a number. Sometimes you do feel younger or older, depending on the case.
It just seems like he's been around forever. Yeah. You forget how young he was when he was with Columbus in those peak years.
Exactly.
At any rate, Alonso.
Freddie Adu is like 26 years old. Wait.
But I don't think it's ideal at the top 6 players. I mean, 30 is just a number, and in advanced sports science and just great. We just age better now, I think, as a society overall, especially our athletes. So 30 is no longer the death note that it used to be in the past, but it's still not ideal to have your top 6 players on the wrong side of 30.
35 is a new 30 in a way that it's more the cutoff where rarely do you see a player go way beyond 35, almost like a outlier basis. After 35, you see a player perform on a high level. That's the new cutoff. Like 35 is the new 30.
Yeah.
Hopefully, because I'm getting closer to the 35 than I was to the 30. So hopefully 35 is the new 30.
Yeah. I would pay to get back to 35, but that's okay. Herculez Gomez, I wanted to really mention him really quickly because there's a lot of TFC fans that still yell at TFC over letting go of him. He's the worst regular performer on the Sounders right now, according to Who Scored. So I think maybe it's time for Herc to go into that broadcast booth where he has a lot of success and he's really good at it. Yeah. So I love Herc. So we're not bashing him here. I think it's time to segue, and he did a great job.
And if you go back to the article, the archives about 4 weeks ago, we had Herculez Gomez on the show.
Exactly. All right, I want to move on and talk about another issue. Speaking of Gomez, see how I did this segue?
Yeah, exactly. Gomez leaving a club, but this time in Turkey and Besiktas.
Besiktas is, I think, a club that might be feeling the pressures of this. Like, obviously, we don't want to break down what's happening in Turkey to a purely sports thing. It's more serious than that. But that said, there's problems there, and this is going to, I think, make the Turkish league kind of touch and go. Would you want to go back? Would you,
no.
If you were an outsider, if you're not Turkish, would you want to go there?
If you read what happened, especially there's a great article on the Avianist here. I know it's a totally different subject, but it gives an idea of what happened behind the scenes with the military and the failed coup that happened 2 weeks ago, a week ago. But I know it's interesting on the sporting level how real life affects sporting decisions by players, and safety comes first, and Gomez decides to leave Besiktas.
Yeah, and this obviously has a North American-Canadian tie-in as well. This Besiktas, one of their top players is Atiba Hutchinson, which is the top. Right? He has been linked to West Ham several times. There was allegedly an offer that was put forth that Besiktas turned down. So we would hope, for Atiba's sake, that he can maybe find his way out there now. And I think probably he will leave with a heavy heart, because Besiktas has been very good to Atiba Hutchinson, and the fans love him there, and he is very much appreciated there. And I suspect that he doesn't want to necessarily just bolt on them in a time of need. But at the same time, you'd have to think that this guy, he needs to play in a stable situation. I'm not sure how stable that's going to be next year, even though they are in the Champions League.
And speaking of players in stable position that are needing to go back to their former glory, Mario Götze is back with Borussia Dortmund. One of the players that Bayern München took over from their feeder team of Borussia Dortmund over the last few years. But this one really didn't pan out in Munich. He wasn't able to get the playing time and necessarily differentiate himself from the other great players that Munich did go. So he's back with Borussia Dortmund, where he became elite striker that he was.
BVB has, you hope that they can improve and sort of challenge Bayern Munich a little bit in the years ahead, to this season, I should say, because it's been kind of boring in Germany the last few years, and we'll make sure that we do insist upon covering Germany a little bit more than obviously a lot more than we have in the past on this show, because
we haven't
covered them at all in the past.
I missed the days of Gold TV when I was able to watch the Bundesliga. Well, it's actually 2 nights on Sportsnet now, so it'll be easier to watch this year as well.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and wrap it up real quick for any Olympic fans listening there. Rosie was just named Canada's flag bearer. It's on my TV right now. Love Rosie, the trampoline gold medalist last year, the only gold medalist we had in London. So, hey, good for Rosie. But that's 2 Canadian and 2 Olympic for this show. So let's take a quick break and continue the show.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, Open Lines After Dark, 5 Rings Daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
All right, Kevin, not to belabor this, but you should monitor the nationalistic press in Quebec today, because this is 7 straight flag bearers who have not been Quebecois. So we're going to hear about that, I suspect, in the days ahead. I thought it would be one of the...
You got to win a gold medal to raise the flag, so there's always that argument.
I would have thought the divers, they've been to a lot of Olympics. I would have maybe made one of them.
I think we always put too much emphasis on who carries the flag anyway. I don't think that should be that controversial anyways. I think it's a tradition. It's an honorary mention. It's an honor to carry the flag, but I don't think it should be such as a controversial as it was over the years.
Yes, fair enough.
And I remember my first big interview I ever did was with Katrina Lemay-Doan, and one of the questions I asked her is like, "Is it too much pressure? Should the athletes feel too much pressure?" She's like, "You know what? We don't. It's different than a competition, and if you prepare yourself correctly, you can do things separately and make abstraction of the fact that people are looking at you and not happy maybe that you're the flag bearer or not. So, yeah, it's not that important."
And she's a lovely, lovely young lady that everyone loves because she's so bubbly and friendly and all that. She's hugging Justin Trudeau right now, and she seems to be blushing a bit too. I think that's the whole country blushes when they hug Justin Trudeau. But at any rate, exactly.
Everybody blushes. Well, exactly. It's just
well, other than the conservatives, and we won't get into that today.
Exactly. There's enough of
that. All right, let's move off this because this is not 5 Rings. But if you want to listen to 5 Rings daily during the Olympics, the NWSL in Montreal talk, there was apparently Joey Saputo, and what was the name of I sent you the reporter's name.
That was Olivier Bretat. I didn't say the quote of the actual question, but last night was to meet the team from the season ticket holders, meeting the team, some of the players, but more the front offices meeting, and there's a press conference and a Q&A, and he was asked about the NWSL, and he mentioned that he was approached. I don't have the timetable here. We don't have a lot of information. We don't have the actual quote per se, but he was approached earlier to have an NWSL team, and he said no. He gently declined because of doesn't know the stability of the league and wasn't convinced of the stability of the league. So now, after it's 3 years, now we're getting to the 4th next year if it gets there, talking about different conversations. But yeah, that was the gist of it.
Yeah, and look, obviously, women's soccer fans will be frustrated with Joey for having that opportunity and not taking it. And I understand that. Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
I said he's not the only one, though.
No, I get it. I'm just in this. The news is out on Montreal right now.
Yeah, no, but remember we were talking. Toronto was probably the same situation too, where it's not just about the NWSL. It's the Canadian aspect of a league like this and all those things. It's more complicated than just. So, do you want a team? Yes or no? So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would say that what is interesting from a Canadian perspective on this is that it's clear because they've obviously, we know that they've offered the impact now. I have, from having back channel conversations with TFC in the past, know that at least had been discussed a little bit there. So that does tell me that the NWSL is clearly open and willing to bring the league into Canada. And I suspect, without hearing any plans for Canadian Premier League to be extended on the women's side, and I do think it should be, but putting that aside, it does look like this is an option to bring it into Canada right now, and the CSA would likely sanction that if one of those MLS teams were willing to put the money behind it. Although I said, and I tweeted this out last night, that I think the best market to launch the NWSL in Canada is in Ottawa, and I'll tell you why. It has all existing infrastructure right there. It has existing fan groups that are pretty strong, that are around that. It has a popular Fury team that they can build off and use for ticketing and things like that. But that Fury team is not so big that it would overwhelm them like a TFC or an Impact would. So I think that would be a better market in my mind. There's history with women's program Fury too. So that would be my better market to launch it. But I don't know anyone willing to put the money forward there. And certainly with the money that they're dumping on the NWSL side, that might be an issue. So I understand.
I think there's that issue as well, that it's a running at a loss. The NWSL, it's not necessarily generating the amount of profit that every party included would. That being said, there is the talk, at least, of women's soccer now in Quebec and in Canada, which wasn't necessarily the case before. PLSQ is openly talking about creating, probably for next year, a women's division as well, or at the early possible stages, maybe in 2018. But you have those possibilities now in Quebec for the women's game, because we all remember a few months ago with the demise of the Dynamo of Quebec and the Laval Comets, the two long mainstay team of women soccer in the province that changed league over the years, but actually folded and weren't able to transition to the new UWS or any other league. So they folded for this year. We'll see if there's chances those two teams reappear, maybe in the PLSQ women's side next year or the years to come, or maybe even, look, the Impact said no to the NWSL. Maybe the way to go to start your women's side is to have a team in the PLSQ Women League. So that would be maybe a possibility for the future. The speculation at this point, but I still believe that the branding of the Montreal Impact on a women's side, especially on the academy level going forward, could be beneficial for soccer in Montreal, soccer in Quebec, and soccer in Canada.
Couple quick points before we move on. I get your bingo card out. Duane promotes League One Ontario. You can check that one off there. The League One Ontario women's division is in context incredibly talented. It's probably more talented in terms of the overall level of play within the context of the world that they exist in than League One Ontario men. National team players, national team pool players, I should say, on the youth side are on several teams in that. We have a couple internationals in that league. Absolutely worth supporting if you support the women's game. There is a high level of women's game in the GTA that is consistently playing every weekend. And I see the attendances there, so I know a lot of you aren't going. So there you go. Check those out if that's what you want. Get out there and support it at the grassroots, because that is how you can really demonstrate that there's a desire for it. The second point I'll make about quickly on that is that the Quebec Selects are going to play the League One Ontario Women's All-Stars in the All-Star game next week. I will see, maybe we might even have an interview that I release as a release only on the Two Solitudes feed for that. I'll try and get the commissioner talking about that next one for those that are interested in the domestic issues there. So there's your bingo card for that. TFC, I tweeted this out, as I said last night. When I asked them in 2013, my direct quote I got back from them, and if you're not a TFC fan, you'll get a bit of a chuckle out of this. What they told me was, candidly, we need to get our blank together first on the MLS side before we take on anything else. And you know what?
They were right.
In fairness to them, I'm not one to offer a lot of excuses for men's teams not supporting the women's game, but in that particular case in 2013, TFC probably was correct. They needed to get their blank together first on the men's side.
That was the Paul Mariner comeback taking over for Aaron Winter era, wasn't it?
That was exactly the lowest point of the valley when that was happening. And
that was
I don't think
9 time.
I don't think women's soccer needed TFC involved at that point. They probably would have ground the league into they buried it before it started if you had TFC 2013. And
women's soccer as a whole would have said, you know what? Keep that branding. We'll start just Toronto something else.
Exactly. All right. Quickly to end the show, I don't have a ton of time to talk about this, but I thought we'd end the show with this. The Hudson River Derby, the New York City Derby, whatever.
Another one.
It's the third version of it this weekend, Kevin. And I, as a non-New Yorker, am a little bit tired of hearing about it now. I think a lot of people, especially if they live sort of west of the Mississippi, are particularly sick of hearing about how vital the New York Derby is to the strength of Major League Soccer, because there is no doubt that the league office being in New York, that it gets a lot of attention.
My next comment would have been the following. Where are the head offices of Major League Soccer located? And where are the head offices of soccer.com located? You get your answer right smack in the middle of that derby. So that is the reason why it does get a lot of airtime. But blue or red, to be quite honest, it's not my derby. It's not a derby that's fascinating. What's fascinating now is those two teams are high in the standings in the Eastern Conference, and we just want to figure out if New York City FC are for real. We still don't know if they're for real, but we might know this weekend. The winner of this game might have a shot at being the actual contender for the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, it's a relative game based on the standings right now. In terms of the rivalry, I think that MLS does a lot, and I understand this. It's the marketing soccer league. It has to push its brand, and it tries to push rivalries as a big part of that brand. And this one is one that most people understand. You know, the Subway Series in Major League Baseball, which doesn't happen very often. This happens too often right now. In fact, I would think that NYCFC. I don't know. Has NYCFC and the Red Bulls played as much as the Mets and the Yankees in the same time they've been together? Probably, and that's a bit absurd, right? So
almost, yeah. No, you get one interleague series usually a year and the playoff if it's possible in the World Series, which will never happens. Come on, the Mets to the World Series. Come on,
they were there last year.
Yes, true, but they're not gonna win it, and it's like cats and dogs getting along. So we're talking about things that don't happen often here.
Yeah, no, I hate the fact that that it's an unbalanced schedule in Major League Soccer. I'm not alone on that. I don't just hate it for single table reasons. It does devalue the Supporters Shield, though. There's no doubt. Basically, just pick who everything's going to win the East, and that's likely who's going to win the Supporters Shield of late. But at any rate, I think that it also creates this 3 times a year situation, which we see here in Toronto and Montreal, where I'm so bloody sick of playing the Impact. It doesn't help with the Canadian Championship, too. But it devalues rivalries to me. There has to be a little level of scarcity. We've belabored that in the past. So I'm not going to do that here, but already there's fatigue in my mind about this New York rivalry, and there shouldn't be. It should be special, and by being in the way it's special is that they play it less often. It's the same. Look. I mean, for those that want to scream East Coast bias here, and I have no doubt because of where it is, that's true. They do push Cascadia a lot, and as someone who doesn't live in Cascadia, I could care less about it, right? So. I think that they maybe MLS might be MLS Soccer, Major League Soccer.com might have to think about playing that down a little bit. But then again, they look at their numbers and maybe that does drive traffic.
Exactly. So that's the caveat too. It does get attention in that market, and that market does drive what the actual offer is across the nation, though, not just in that market. So the power of New York is well known, not just on the soccer level, but in media as a whole. So no, there's always that aspect to the like you mentioned, the East Coast bias.
Yeah. And what they're doing is they're taking attention away from the rivalry that clearly everyone in Major League Soccer cares the most about, and that is obviously the Trillium Cup. That will be wrapped up later this month. And for those that are wondering, because I've had a few people ask it, that there's been two games against Columbus and Toronto so far this year, and both have ended in a draw. If, in fact, it ends in a draw, in a total score, like if 3 draws in there are rules in place, and the holders retain. So, unfortunately for Toronto fans, you have to get the win this week, or next, I guess it's in 2 weeks, against Columbus. Otherwise, they're going to take the Trillium Cup. And if TFC loses the Trillium Cup, I don't know, fold the franchise, right?
Well, yeah, of course. So it's talking about such an important trophy. Somebody's going to get fired if they don't win that trophy. Heads will roll.
Yeah, exactly. The best remains is when they handed it to Torsten Frings, who was at a TFC game a couple weeks ago. He was all decked out in Blue Jay gear. That's the funny thing. The Europeans love the Jays when they come here. They all become huge Jays fans. It's the strangest thing. I guess it's the major franchise that's playing while they're here. I guess that makes some sense. But at any rate,
yeah.
Okay. On that note, Kevin, tomorrow is the Two Soccer Today, which means it'll be MLS focused, which shouldn't be too much different than what it was today. However, we do have the branding on 2S Extra tomorrow. Until that time, Kevin, as always, I'll let you say goodbye.
11 a.m. tomorrow, sportspodcastingnetwork.com/soccer today. Live radio show from Monday to Friday about the beautiful game of football with a soccer perspective. Until tomorrow, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.